Okay. All right. Okay. Well, let's go. Let's kick off.
I've raised my hand, so if I can go first.
Go on then.
I have come this weekend to talk with somebody I have known for a long time and I trust very much. And she was talking about the kingdom of water and the spirit of night spouse. Is that anything you know about or you can talk?
This the kingdom of water. And what was the second? The spirit
The
of.
spirit of night spouse, night husband and night wife.
Okay. Night as in.
The night when we sleep.
Yep. Okay. No idea. So in what context?
She was saying that any sexual abuse, even the lightest one, because I feel that as a victim, you are made to feel guilty, so you don't do anything and you don't know. That gives a legal right to the enemy to place a spirit of husband on a woman and a spirit of wife on a man, which is going to scare anybody who would like to have a relationship with you. Anybody who can be a potential spouse would be scared, and they tend to come in your dreams because they come in your bed at night and they want you for themselves.
Okay. Yeah. I have come across a number of spiritual entities like that. I mean, technically they're called incubus and succubus.
That's what he said, yes.
Yeah. So they do plague people and create huge guilt and shame, condemnation, and I've even heard of them taking physical form, which has been quite a challenge to certain people who I've spoken to and ministered to over it. But in a sense, the same basic principles apply in dealing with anything like that. You find the legal right, you remove the legal right, and you then use the verdict to become free.
And you have to divorce.
Deep, yeah, it's a divorce.
Divorce from them.
Yeah, but it is quite a very deeply shameful thing. When I've talked to people, ministered to people, and this is a while ago now, but who felt such deep shame over it because they were paralyzed by it when it happened. They almost like couldn't stop it, and we sort of at that point in time, so, well, can you use the name of Jesus? And they just couldn't. But I think if I was to minister to them now, knowing the basis of the legal rights using the court system, I would give them probably some greater authority to be able to use that and to be able to be free from it. But these things do occur. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they run generationally and they operate familially in families and different things. But if ever it happens, then I would, find the legal right. That would be the key.
Yes, and that's like that incest happens in family, and you find it one generation after the other. Yeah. So I've learned so much about that. She's called to that. She's just amazing. But I never heard anything about it, and I went on the internet and I couldn't find anything. So I said, okay, I'm meeting with my pastor.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I've talked to people who I trust, and I have no doubt that they were telling me the truth about what was manifesting and what was going on, mm-hmm. And how deeply shameful it was, and how it caused real, in a sense, debilitation, because the enemy uses it to stop us fulfilling destiny. Shame, yes. Condemnation, yes. They are all used to stop us. And if people see themselves with that identity, which is dirty, I mean, it's unclean, that's what it makes people feel.
Yeah.
Then, that can paralyze people kingdom-wise.
Yes, and also I know that any victim of sexual abuse, even the lightest one, is made to feel guilty that it's their fault. It's the most common things in these things. You hear it so much. You feel guilty as a victim. And you can see it so much in people saying, you ask for it and you deserve it or things like that. Yeah. And they carry that. And I remember reading the witnessing of a woman who had been raped, who said they will take 6, 7, 8 showers a day because they were feeling so dirty, and that it stayed with them. There is no doubt, having talked to people, to women, especially women who have been raped or sexually abused, it sticks on them, it's horrible. It destroyed them. Their personalities completely change.
So, I mean, many of the people we work with addictions, 75% of the men have come from abusive backgrounds. And we deal with men. So you can imagine, again, that's for men, it's a disempowering and a presentation of weakness and all sorts of different types of manifestations. But generally, they feel so ashamed, they cover it up using substances, not to have to face the reality of it.
Yes.
It's very difficult for them to bring that stuff into the open.
Yeah, very much.
But once they do, the power of it gets broken. And I think for everything like this, once it's brought into the light, then there is God's able to engage it. Where it's kept in darkness because of shame, I think there's a scripture I think it's in Corinthians. It says, things hidden because of shame, and people hide them deeply because they're feeling so dirty, so ashamed. And once they're kept hidden, the enemy thrives in darkness.
Yeah.
Once we can bring things into the light, then, that then gives God an opportunity to begin to effectively bring healing and wholeness. And some people, get so damaged that they fragment, so that you get the sort of dissociative disorders within some of those abusive situations. And people get stuck in those emotional traumatic things, and some are so traumatic that they're dissociated around and people can't even remember it, but they suffer from it. That's the thing. The suffering that people, particularly if people don't remember and it then gets triggered, people really do suffer. So these are some of the things we've got to ministrate the kingdom into, to bring things into the light. And I think there's a lot of administration of these type of things going on because you get so much of these things are now being brought into the light. The football scandal of abuse, the public school scandals. You have so many things now, the entertainment industry scandals, things which are hidden for decades are now coming into the light.
Yeah.
And I think those are now, because the sons of God are beginning to administrate governmentally to bring these things and expose them so that things can change. But then we do have to help people.
Yes.
Once things are brought into the light, if people have got no recourse for help, they can end up, suicidal and other things as a result of it. So,
Can you repeat the name you said in Invictus and
Incubus and Succubus?
Incubus, Succubus.
Yeah, they're Latin terms, I think.
Yes, they are. I'll have to look into that. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Okay, Agnes, you got your hand up there.
Yeah, this is a really a topic that's very, very close to me. It's an area that I've really deeply suffered, and one of the things with me is that I cannot remember. And I've had, ministry, a few, not really like that deep. No, I think I have not even scratched the surface, of this thing. And I cannot remember. And I had ministry one time where this person was able to see what happened, but it just did not come to me. It's not something that I can, that I can remember, or that I can.
I think when it comes to something like that and you can't remember, then the key is not to go trying to dig into it, but allow God to bring it to the surface. So when he's good, once needs to deal with it, because just because we have issues in our lives doesn't mean it's always the best time to deal with them straight away. God knows what needs to be brought to the surface. I mean, a while ago, I had a situation where I was triggered by a situation at home and responded really badly to it. And I just couldn't understand why, because it came completely out of the blue. And I had no memory of anything. But the reaction was so bad that I realized it must have been a trigger, even though I couldn't remember, when I couldn't account for why I responded in a particular way. But I was really triggered by a situation. So I went back to God, and all I could see was a black area. I couldn't see what was in it. I couldn't get into it. And so I said, okay, God, if there's something there that I need to deal with, then you bring it back to my memory when it's the right time for me to deal with it. And so for months, nothing. I didn't get anything at all. And then one day I was engaging with the Father, and God just brought the memory back to me of what was there from my childhood, which was something that got emotionally triggered, and I had to then deal with the memory that got restored. And I had completely blanked it. I could not see it at all. And I even remembered the incident, and I remembered the incident to do with my sister, and my part in it was completely obscured, completely. But when God brought it back, then obviously I was able to deal with it. But he didn't deal with it for months. Even though I knew there was this black area, he didn't deal with it for months. And I just had to trust in the right timing for those things to be dealt with, rather than me trying to force the issue. And I think that's, for me, I would encourage everybody to present yourself as living sacrifices to God, and allow God to then deal with what he wants to do as the high priest. You know, the sacrifice didn't prepare itself. The high priest prepared it once it was offered. And if we offer ourselves to God, then he will do the preparation needed along our journey when the right timing is there. And I'm not saying we should avoid it or try and avoid dealing with things, but allow him to show us what other things he wants to deal with at any time, rather than assuming just because there may be something that we've got to go and try and dig in for it and try and find it out. So if you haven't got the memory, then I would just, again, surrender it to God and ask him to unveil whatever the memories are or whatever the issues are in his timing, and then you'll be ready to deal with it.
Because a lot of it is it's been playing up in my dreams and attacks and that kind of thing. So I've had a few court sessions, dealt with a few things, and it looks like it comes in layers. And
well, sometimes it is like that. I've dealt with things in many different levels in my life. I thought I dealt with it at the level I could at the time, and then God has taken it deeper at some point in the future. And I think God does things like that in seasons, because he knows when we're able to deal with some of those things, and when we're not. And and sometimes you need a period for things to be outworked before you move into something else. And I remember even in my journey of having my father wounds healed and restored and things, it happened over quite a number of years. It wasn't just a one and for all thing. Over years, God restored a bit by bit by bit. But then each time I had an encounter that restored something, then I went through the process of being outworked in my life, rather than you get so overwhelmed with something that it's very difficult to outwork it. And I remember, over probably a period of, must have been 7 or 8 years, that God restored different aspects to me in regard to fatherhood and sonship and areas like that. And, you know, I dealt with it as best I could. And then another occasion, emotions got released. And then God brought me into an encounter, which I guess restored something that I never really had. And then took me into different levels and eventually healed the scars that were still there, even after all the wounds had been healed. And I didn't realize. And there were scars, which were memories. And those memories made me, in a sense, suspicious and guarded and protected in certain areas. You know, so over a period of time, God does things. You know, if he does it with you all in one go, great. But it wasn't my experience. It was a process that each part of that process did something that then prepared me for the next part of the process. And eventually, with my, you know, the final sort of closure of the whole areas of fatherhood and sonship, it was when I met my father in the court of the upright and, you know, engaged him there. And that sort of brought a closure to it in a sense. But that was, you know, years and years, you know, probably 20 odd years from the beginning of the process to that final closure of it.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
No, but I'm not saying you have to wait 20 years. I'm just saying that was my journey and my process. And along the way, you know, there were, you know, it wasn't that I was suffering along the way. You know, God dealt with the things when he needed to, and that worked. You know. Okay. Anyone else got anything they want to share?
Sorry. So sorry. So what do you do in the meantime, you know, as you're having all these attacks and, you know?
Well, if you're under attack, it's different. You know, if you're under attack, you need to deal with the attack. I wasn't under attack in this process. I was just in a process of restoration and healing. If you're being attacked and you know you're being attacked, then you have to take authority in against the attacker. So I wouldn't sort of, you know, if I was under attack, then I would deal with the attack and stop it. You know, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything related to a particular issue gets sorted out all in one go. But you can still take authority in a situation as a son of God, particularly if you've done some things in the courts and you find some of the legal rights that the enemy has to attack. You know, you can use that, but also, you know, you can stop things attacking you, even if you haven't dealt with everything, by using the authority you have as a son of God and effectively directing that authority to your attacker and forbidding him to attack you. You know, in a sense, sometimes you can get a restraining order until you've dealt with everything. And that's what you do in a legal system. You know, you can get a restraining order against someone before things are finally dealt with in a court. You know, and that can happen in a divorce case. If particularly it's an abusive situation, you can get a restraining order for the wife against the husband so that he cannot come and engage her until eventually there's a divorce in the court. So I would look at restraining orders, take restraining orders against those who are attacking you until you can get a final resolution of it and find out, you know, what are the full legal rights and get full victory in the court.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Anyone else?
Can I just flag something up, Mike?
Yeah, sure.
Pauline, my wife and I, Pauline, and our friends Mike and Sue, the retired leaders of the fellowship here in Cyprus, who are now back in the UK, we've been invited to the Philippines for a ministry tour. So it's going to be next January. And we'll probably be there for about 2 months. We've got several things to do, so it's quite a time, really. But when we did some bench work around it, Mike's actually part of the Engaging God program, Mike and Sue as well. We felt we should felt the Lord say very clearly we should begin to introduce them to the Engaging God program. So it's going to be quite an opportunity. Okay. We've been working with several churches in a couple of locations. So it was like, at some point anyway, a conversation about how to prepare for that. And sure. Any advice on how we should begin to introduce it. We'd like people to know about, you obviously, about the program. But obviously have a very different economy there to the rest of the world. I think the average wage is something like $2 American an hour or something like that. So they're not kind of very well off. And also what resources we could use, what you could say we could use. I know that because we signed a disclaimer or something when we registered with you saying we wouldn't use some of the material. So it's kind of what could we use? Or
some of it in terms of the Engaging God program, obviously we don't want finances to hinder people being able to engage God and to grow and mature in sonship. So we have scholarship type of things and different pricing structures for third world countries, and there are quite a number of people who can't, even in first world countries, who basically aren't in a position to be able to cover costs. So we do that. We also have church groups, ways for churches to use it, in which it can be presented by one person who is a member of the program, and then the others can do it in that way, either by listening to the material, whatever. And so we've got different ways of doing it. Best thing to do would be to get in touch, and we'll sort something out. One of the things that we have also looked to do is to put all the material onto a memory stick, and then people who don't have internet access can still access it. So obviously you still need a computer in one sense, but one person then can use that and help facilitate that with others.
And also any advice, again, at some point on how you prepare for a journey like that, because there are all sorts of spiritual issues involved.
Sure, yeah. Once, obviously, you have a mandate to go. Once you're clear about the mandate, then you're looking for the specifics of what that mandate authorizes you to do. And then you can begin to administrate in preparation for it. I mean, I tend to visit in the spiritual realm and see what's going on in the area, in the atmosphere, look to see if there are any specific dynamics that God gives me any authorization to deal with while I'm there. So looking at that type of thing, look for legislation that you can develop specifically for each group or for a nation or whatever, and do things like that. Start, preparing the angels, engaging with the angels of the area,
right.
Sending them in advance to prepare the ground, to prepare the atmosphere. Lots of different things really that you can do in preparation. Once you have a mandate, then you've got the authority to do all those things in preparation for what you're doing. Obviously, there can be opposition, and that's therefore making sure that you're working in agreement with those who are inviting you, and come into agreement with them. And when I go into a particular country, I don't come with any sense of, well, I have a right to be here. I'm invited, and therefore my authority is on the basis of the invite that God then authorizes and gives you a mandate for. So then whenever I do something, I always do it in cooperation with everybody, in the sense, well, are we in agreement to do this or to do that or to do this, rather than assuming. I mean, I have my own open heaven. So wherever I go, I'm living under my own open heaven for my own life. But when I'm working with other groups, I want to work with them and ensure that they are empowered to carry on after you leave. The thing is, it's making sure that you leave a deposit there that they can then continue with. So it's their place, it's their authorization, really, that you are then empowering. And I think you can do that by empowering them in the decisions and in the process and the journey that you're in, rather than doing it for people. Do it with them and mentor them in the processes by doing it, doing court cases with them, getting legislation for their particular areas, looking at some of those things together, establishing government. The key is, there needs to be foundational government. Most churches that are in those type of areas are usually based in some religious system, or they have religious baggage that you've got to help them deal with. And usually that's governmental. So they'll have either male orientated government, or they'll have top down, very hierarchical government, positional government. In other words, people are getting their identity from their positions, the pastors or the prophets or whatever stream they're in. There will be baggage that you're going to have to help them deal with if they're going to engage heaven and establish anything on earth. It's got to be foundationally, governmentally different. And that may take quite a bit of working with them to deal with that religious baggage, because it can be very deeply ingrained within not just the religious system, but also the culture that they're in. If the culture is very male orientated, then that can have a strong influence then in restricting people's ongoing outworking of things, particularly for the women. When I went into Borneo, I was working with the church there, and it was obviously very male orientated. All the leadership structure was male. So I sort of brought it up, and just sort of said, well, okay, is this cultural? Do you think this is biblical? And it was obviously a challenge. Now, I wasn't there long enough to work through all the challenges. I just opened up some avenues for them to start thinking about, how God views things from a governmental perspective. And, there's often the pastor type figure holds a high respect and regard, and that can easily be manipulative and controlling. And that's something you've got to look out for, and build some bridges of relationship that help you walk across into those issues. If you've got a matchstick bridge, you can't drive a 10-ton truck over it. So if you're there for a few months, which gives you probably greater opportunity to do that, whereas when I'm going into a place for a few days, then I've got to pick my stuff to deal with quite carefully, and not be offending people for the sake of it when I haven't really got the relational ongoing thing to work things out.
Very helpful, Mike. Thank you. Lovely. Yeah, we'll talk again, and maybe I'll email you or something.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We felt the Lord gave us an outline straight away. First time we did it. It was interesting. At least some of the issues. Yeah.
Emphasis on reconciliation, and then we got marriage reconciliation, marriage refreshment, things like that, renewal, and also the orphans. So there was some areas, but then when we met again, the Lord said, I want you to introduce them to the Engaging God program. So we thought, okay. So we're going to two sites. On one site, we've just finished, we're just in the process of raising money to build a retreat center for pastors. And some of the churches are growing quite well, really, that way we know, because there are plenty of Filipinos on the island here, and we have contacts with some of the senior leaders who are, one pastor in the island is pastoring now 7 churches, I think. 1 in Lebanon and 6 here, and then he's opening the centre. So we've got good links and relationships and several things going on, but we feel when we're going to be there, we're going to be clear about what we're doing, because we'll probably do it in 2 or 3 centres and just focus on certain things. So we'll probably do some marriage encounters or renewal things. We're not sure what yet. But we're dealing with the leadership, I think, trying to get the leaders together. That's probably where I think we'll start to introduce them to some of the principles of government, as you say, heavenly government, and Robert Henderson type stuff, the courts of accusation and stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff out there now where other people are, coming at it from different angles. They may not quite be putting it all together the way some of us are. I think we're kind of there at the forefront of something where we can see, Mark Verkler's 4 keys on hearing the voice of God and journaling, and then Robert Henderson and the Courts of Heaven. They're very helpful resources. And,
they are, yeah. And they're all part of people's journeys that will move them into a place of maturity in some of these things, definitely. Awesome. Great.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah.
Okay. Laura,
just share, my hand is raised just to share something with Chris, but with everybody. In my journey, I find that suggesting for people to read the blog, Mike's blog, is really a super introduction. It exists in many languages now, not only in English and French, because there's German, Spanish, South American, and Chinese, isn't it, Mike?
Some, yeah.
Yeah. And I find it's a excellent introduction. People go into it and start to ask questions, etc. And for the people who don't have the internet, they print it and they pass it on. So I've had a lot of good fruit, I will say, for just passing the link for the blog and let the people think about it and come back to you. The blog is a very good introduction, and you have a lot of diagrams and materials there you can use before, engaging into the cost of being a member. So that's what I've been doing with Big Fruit, lovely fruit, yes.
Thank you, Laura. That's right, the Joshua generation and Mike's recent articles on good ones.
Well, you can pick and choose which ones to work with, but yeah, print them out. I mean, I've gone to places and found that people had printed them all out and categorized them and all, and it's something then that can be photocopied and people can then don't have access to the internet can still do that. Obviously, you have to be able to read English or one of the other languages that some of the things are in, but in a sense, someone who's teaching something or someone's presenting something it is a good place to start. Definitely.
Very good. I think there's a lot of English speakers in the Philippines. Not everybody, but a good proportion of people speak English. Yeah. So we'll be mainly speaking in English. We can't speak any Filipino, but they will be translating in some places. Yeah. Thanks, Laura. Thanks.
Okay, any other? Oh, Mary, you got your hand up there?
Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Mike. Yeah. I just wanted to. Sorry, I came late though. Yeah. I just wanted to ask, about this marketplace ministry, because I heard of it and I heard that you kind of recommend the place for healing. I've been trying to check it on the internet, and it appears that a church or something, maybe the ministries under whatever they are doing. I just want to know, about your view about the healing that they do.
Yeah, we are in relationship with Marketplace Ministries at Totnes. They run a freedom center. They run forgiveness therapy. They do lots of alternative healing therapies using sound, using light, using oils. And I would highly recommend them. I'm part of a bench of 3 with one of their bench. We do regional things. In fact, we've got a weekend this coming weekend where we're doing something together in establishing heavenly government on earth here. And Lindy Strong, who's the lady I'm in relationship with there, operates in the realms of heaven, and I would certainly recommend their healing retreats and other therapies for what they do. We have a sort of a strong relationship with them. In fact, they're actually up here today doing therapies for our staff, as we've got a staff day today where therapies are being delivered in a training setting for our ministry teams to help. So, yeah. So,
it's Tottenham close to Barnstable.
Yeah, Totnes is about 75 miles away, about an hour and a half.
To you?
Yeah. It's on the south coast of Devon, and we're on the north coast. So basically it's about 75 miles away. So
yeah. I now understand what God was telling me. That they are not the same area. Oh, thank you, Lord.
Yeah, we're both in Devon, although Devon's quite a wide area. But yeah, we do work quite a lot together, and have a lot of overlapping areas of ministry, and we're more governmental, I would guess, in our approach to things. They are more sort of therapeutic, but we are both learning from each other, so we're adopting quite a lot more therapies as well in what we do. So
and that's what I've just found out, because when in fact I didn't ask the Lord if I should go there, because I was introduced to the place, and I was, the way you just want to get up and do things. I now remember that I'm now on my own. And so I had a dream, and the Lord was showing me, because I wanted to travel to the conference, conference coming, and I thought they are the same route. If I could pass by there before I come. Then the Lord was showing me that there are two different angles, so I got that. So that's, I just wanted to know, all about that. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, it's an example how people who have different approaches can actually work together and have a united heart over things. Because we have very different approaches in some ways, in terms of I'm probably a little bit more structured and from a teaching perspective, but their view is, well, we engage heaven and God shows us something and we go and do it, which is great, and we do have a really strong working relationship together in outworking those things. So when we do regional things, we tend to flow and share things from different perspectives that give people a fuller picture of things, because everyone has different ways that they find easier to engage with,
Yeah. And I believe that everything is relational, is from intimacy, because this is what I'm experiencing and what God is showing me. Because I don't want to do things because everyone is doing it, but sometimes you get carried away and forget, and the Lord will pull you back there. Look, it might work for others. This is the way I want it. So I've been feeling like when my healing coming out from when I engaged the ark, and I put myself in the fire, and it's been so intense. I could sense it. When I'm in there, I even went. I bought to remind me and to put that physical thing into it. I bought my ark, and it's like I just dedicated it to. I want to show you. I dedicated it. Oh, I love it.
Very good. Always good to have a visual aid.
Yeah, visual. I'm a visual person, Mike. I am very visual. So it's really working well, and I'm so happy. So when I come in there and I engage the Yod Heh, I could just feel the heat, like I'm just in that fire. It's just inviting me more and more. I just love that. And I believe things has been shifting off, like that. So, I'm happy with that.
Good. Awesome. Yeah.
Right. I raise my hands to say something to Mary, Mike. Mary, I am a part of a satellite of Marketplace Ministry in Bath. And I am also working on the forgiveness therapy. I've done many seminars with them. They have Restoring Your Identity, which is fantastic. I've done 3-4 different things with them, and they are absolutely brilliant, and they are fun, and it's extremely different as what Mike was saying. It's an approach which is completely different from Mike, but which is very complementary, obviously. And they are great. And you will find, if you go on the internet, that they have satellites all around the UK. I know Bath, Bristol, Reading, Oxford, something like London, I think. So you can inquire if there's one. I don't know where you are, but if there's one close to you.
Okay.
But their seminars in Totnes, that's really worth it. It's Monday to Friday usually, or Monday to Sunday, but great, absolutely great. So
thank you. I'm going to see that on their website.
They have a good website, and they are very accessible. They are lovely people.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anyone else got anything? Any other questions and things you want to share, talk about?
I can share, if you want, the journey of my car. As last time I shared that it was wrecked the few hours before.
Yeah.
I have walked the whole way in love, forgiving the people, deciding that if my car had been wrecked, it was for a good reason, because I couldn't see any legal right, and that God was finding it too dangerous. It was going to be 19 years old. It has served me well. So I have been thanking God and thanking my car, and decided that I was all excited having a newish car. And I walked it in love, and everything has fallen in place one after the other without any problem, I could have had many problems, but I follow what God was saying. I did it in love and in peace. I never let any negative feelings coming out or starting in me. I just walk it in love, and it's brilliant. I'm going to have my new car at the end of the week.
Excellent. Very good. Very good.
And some people have told me that they have been very impressed in the way I walk that, and that has really give them things to ponder about and to think about. So for me, that was the best, is that people have seen it, and that has, been planting seeds or growing seeds in their mind about the way of taking everything positively, forgiving, refusing any negative thought, etc. So it has been a great experience.
Good. Excellent. Great. Yeah. And it's great when you see something through to completion in something like that, administrating it and seeing it at work. It's great. Very good.
Mike, the restoration of all things. Well, Ronald, I knew Ronald was going to say something, but I beat you to it, Ronald.
Okay, go ahead, Chris. No problem.
Well, thanks, Ronald. I'm listening to the the modules on restoration. I was listening to one this morning. So where are we up to? I know you make a good point about restoration has to start with us. And some days I'm feeling very restored, and other days I'm feeling very not restored. But I know it's got to be kind of, what can I expect? Is there anything I can do to posture myself that will make it easier? Or is it really just the journey? There's lots of, like you were saying before, about some of the issues, you can only deal with them, in a certain pace because of the journey. Yeah. So, but it's an exciting topic. Are you still teaching on it, or?
Yeah, no, I'm still teaching on it. Obviously, I didn't do it I was away last week, so I didn't do it this weekend. And next weekend I've got this other ministry area, this regional thing, so I won't be doing it this week. But I will cover some more. It's not going to be, I'm not going to go into 30, 40 parts or anything. Probably 10 or so, maybe 12, 15, I don't know, something like that. Just to cover it to the degree that then leads into our sort of understanding of government from a heavenly perspective and our responsibility in the restoration of all things, so that when we then see the court system and the realms of heaven, it fits into context. That's why I've done it now, is really to set the context for why do we need to legislate and why do we need to be seated in the heavenly places, because we have a responsibility as sons to be revealed so that things can be restored, and creation can be set free and restored. So it's putting it into those contexts. And obviously the controversial aspects of it, I have to bring out, because I'm going to teach people and help people to engage in doing some of those things. So if you don't set a context, it's difficult then to then outwork that context by helping people engage with wisdom's heights, and those things that can open up doors and avenues into seeing restoration within their generational lines and things like that. So yeah, that's why I'm doing it at this stage. I'm not doing it just to be controversial, but I think you have to, present the scope of what's potentially all things is about. Otherwise you're limited in what you believe you can see restored if you don't see it from a fuller perspective. So that's some of the reason. Obviously, yeah, it does start with our restored identity. And more than anything else, if we know who we are, and that identity is restored, and that broken image is restored back to, this is who God sees us as, this is who he created us to be, then we then connect up with creation in a different way than if we're part of it, in a sense, broken, still broken as part of it, particularly in the way we see ourselves and the way we identify. So I think that's really where it starts for all of us, is having the relationship with God that we then behold and become by looking into the mirror, if you like, and seeing reflected back our sonship, and we can be restored into that image of sonship, and then that releases our position of sonship, and then that the authority of sonship begins to outwork. It's no point being seated in heavenly places if you don't know what you're supposed to do. So I thought I'd set this as a foundation, really, that then once we then really move on to the pathway of responsibility, we'll then have a fuller context to it. That's really why I did the New versus Old series, simply because if we're going to legislate from heaven and we're going to use old mindsets and old belief systems, again, it's going to limit the effectiveness of our authority, because God won't authorize it. We might be doing things, but they carry no weight if we're doing things from an old perspective. And if we're doing things, in a way which is reflective of our old mindsets and patterns of belief. And just as this deconstruction of our minds prepares us, for some of these new things, and some of the expansion of our understanding and our experience, that again leads into a fuller understanding of restoration and what is possible. So it is a challenge for people who are still stuck in some of the older religious mindsets, but that's hopefully part of their journey. This might provoke something along the line for God to stir them. But I'm not really speaking, doing these things for those people who don't agree, really, because otherwise it just creates confrontation rather than opportunity. It's those who along their journey are at that point where God is already at work in unveiling that there must be more to it than they thought, and also there must be more to it than this God that they thought they knew. Because we're looking to introduce people to engage God. And once they engage God, it will, without a doubt, challenge what people thought they knew about him. And therefore, all the systems of belief that they have will be challenged, because God will challenge it. You can't fail to look into the face of God and see something different than you thought. It's just inevitable that it will begin to challenge our previous and our preconceived ideas, and it will challenge our confirmational biased view of when we read the Bible or when we talk to people. That view gets challenged by encountering God. And in terms of restoration, the limits start to get removed once we start to see the depth of God's love for his creation. And when we see God as being a loving God who loves creation and all that he's made and has a desire for relationship and intimacy, then some of the struggles that people have to do with the angry, sort of retributive and punitive God get challenged and removed when you've met him and you know his love. So personally, if we don't know his love, it's very difficult for us to love others and creation in the way he does. So all that is part of the restoration of all things. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting journey for some, and hopefully some stretching and challenging. And once you get stretched, you can't go back to where you were before. So, that's part of, I think, what God is wanting to do, is to stretch us a little bit beyond where we've been so that we can go further. So, yeah.
Thanks, Mike. We'll talk, no doubt we'll be.
Yeah. Okay, Mary, yeah, you got your hand up there again.
Yeah, Mike. With what you are saying about restoration of all things, I think it's been stirring up challenging people and confrontation, because I happen to be in one of Ian's recent question and answer, whereby they put question across and the answers. So when they were talking about this visiting, helping, and ministering to people, and from there. So so when they asked that question, but I know that at present you are the only one, I think. I don't know, I haven't heard of someone else who is boldly written that out, because that was what the Lord has taken you to that area, and inside of me, and I believe everything. So then one good thing that he has replied, he said, why are people going to confront things or saying things that God has not actually put them in that side, or reveal to them, or give them, because as far as he's concerned, it doesn't bother him, and he doesn't look at that side, because that's not the way where God has not actually told him to go to that area, which is a good thing, good feeling to just say, okay, until probably I get that revelation, or God wants me to know things about it, which answers the question. But one thing that he said, that it's not scriptural, that if that has to happen, that people have to be raised up from dead first before any ministry and things like that. Then what you just said, hold on, please. Oh, Lord. I'm sorry. So what makes me to just be thinking about that is the way that our mindset and what we believe in the interpretation of the Bible and stuff like that, and what we look at hell to be, that God punished people there and they have to remain there forever and stuff like that. So, and it's just bringing out, different mindset from people, and I know that as time goes on, that if people are curious about it, or they just wanted to know the facts about that, and they tend to hungry enough to go ask, the Lord will start to show people, how that works. So that's just what I wanted to share.
Sure, yeah. I mean, in a sense, our belief systems, have to be challenged, because if we think we know everything there is to know about God, then we are obviously deceived. And, you know, this is why I smile when I look at systematic theology books that are presenting this systematic view of this is what God is like, and, you know, we've tied it all down. You know, it's going to challenge us. You know, if God is infinite, then we've got an awful lot more to experience. You know, and I think a lot of people, you know, if they're honest, they will mostly agree that things have changed in their own lives and their own beliefs over the years. That there are certain things that they now believe that they didn't believe before. And you just have to say, well, okay, but there may be more. And if there's more, you've got to be realizing, just like you did before, you may have to come to a point where you accept what you now believe isn't the truth. Because that's the only way that I changed my beliefs on healing or spiritual gifts or any other of those things that in the past, you know, I changed my view on eschatology, all sorts of different areas. I had to accept what I presently think about this isn't correct, and I got to let it go. And if you find that if someone has an area that God has given them fresh revelation about, then there's common ground there to then work through, well, there may be more. But I don't get into debates with people about their belief systems if they're not open, because all they'll be trying to do is to prove you wrong rather than to talk about the possibilities that there may be in God beyond what we're presently able to experience. You know, so belief systems are hugely challenging for people, and I pick up very quickly whether someone's open to God changing their belief systems or not. And if they're not open, then I'm not going to try and change them, because if God isn't at that point, I'm not going to jump in and try and change someone's belief system when, you know, God is not able to do it himself at this point in time. So you've got to respect where people are, respect that people are on a journey, and that journey for them may well be in some areas, you know, 100 miles back. In some areas, they could be 100 miles in front. And I think you have to look at that and see we are a mixture, and therefore some people can have amazing testimonies of things in their lives, and in some areas, very, very negative testimonies. And it's sort of like, how does that work? Because God takes us as we are, and we're all starting from different places. You know, we didn't start at the same place. We started at all different places. We were born into different cultures. We had different upbringings. We had different religious, cultural experiences. So we've all had different places that we start from. And therefore, you have to realize that God will take people differently from those starting places to get them where he wants them to go. And so, you know, I've looked to honor people for, you know, where they are. And it may not be my responsibility to try and shift them from where they are. And if it isn't, I'm certainly not going to get involved in trying to change people's minds, which is why I don't tend to enter into a lot of debates about things. Because if someone's fixed in their situation, and, you know, when people say something like, well, the Bible's really clear about this, you realize that you're not going to win an argument. So there's no point even entering into a discussion most of the time when people are using the Bible as their total reference point rather than the Word of God, you know, as a person. You know, Jesus is my reference point to truth, not a book. Now, I'm not saying that what is written in that book in the original intent of God isn't beneficial for us, but most of us don't have the original intent of God for everything that we have in our English Bible, particularly. So we're already at a disadvantage and struggling. I saw a really good Facebook post the other day, and it was this sentence, and it was completely without punctuation, spaces, and anything else. And it was said something like, this is how the Koine Greek, New Testament, biblical Greek language was written, something like that. And it was just no punctuation, no spelling, no actual separation of words. And all you had was a jumble of letters. And you have to try and work out what that's supposed to be. No capital letters, no full stops. I mean, it's just like, you can imagine that with one sentence. What about 10 paragraphs of just letters all in one thing? I mean, it must be so difficult to actually interpret what it was saying. And, that for me is an indication that where people are stuck in the Bible clearly says this, they're not really open to the fact that they may have a confirmational bias when they read it. And there was a guy the other day who posted a few things, and he sort of said, well, I might as well throw my Bible out. And I said, well, there's no need to throw your Bible out. Just stop reading it with a confirmational bias, which says you already know what it says, and allow the Holy Spirit to show you what it says. But that's very hard for people, particularly when they're entrenched in an evangelical perspective on how the Bible is, and the sola scriptura, the Bible alone way of engaging. Anyway, good. It's a good place to engage with people if you have an open discussion about things, but not a place to go if people are just trying to prove you wrong.
I guess it's good to be gullible to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. And again, that's a journey, and it's not going to all happen in one go.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. All right. Anyway, okay, we've got a couple more hands up. We'll just deal with those, and then we'll finish. Okay, I can't remember who put their hand up first. So,
just wanted to say,
Laura did.
Yeah. Just wanted to say, in my first question, we talk about incubus and succubus. You didn't say anything on the kingdom of water, if that has any meaning for you.
Well, there are a number of things that are related to water spirits and things like that, which are interconnected with the way that the enemy sort of counterfeits things that God does. And some of it goes back to the original creation, and how things have been fragmented and separated. But a lot of it, I don't have specific things into those areas because they're not my area of mandate anymore. I used to have a lot more involvement in ministering to people and deliverance and those type of things, whereas now it's not something that God is mandated me to do. So I don't look into a lot of it because I just don't have any authority to do so. But there are people who do, and I think there are people who administrate some of the ministries, particularly dealing with lingering human spirits and that type of thing, who go into this in a lot more detail. Because they're coming up against this in their ministries, where it's not something I'm coming up against particularly any longer because I'm not functioning there. And, I live under my own open heaven, so I'm not really affected by it. But others are dealing with these things, and there are those who are functioning, from a newer perspective, are finding sort of governmental things from a spiritual heavenly perspective to deal with some of these issues. But you'll find that the enemy always tries to counterfeit. So when you see, say, the different realms of heaven, you'll find the enemy has different realms that he tries to counterfeit. And some of them would be separating things into elemental things. So the water spirits, elemental spirits of fire, and earth, wind, fire, water, those type of things, which are lumped together under more of a elemental type understanding, really. And they're counterfeits of the fact that God has different realms that he functions in, and they function in different ways administratively. But you have Leviathan, is a water type thing. So there's lots of biblical things which are related to that. And, you have, symbolism in terms of water and land. And, the land is always the promise, and the water is always those who are outside of the promise and where the enemy is active. And you see things coming out of the sea. And when you trace some of those symbolic things, you'll see it's always the enemy that's looking to come out of the sea to effectively challenge the land.
Thank you very much, Mike. Just to say, when I turn off the camera, is not to make you seasick, so I can bounce as much as I want.
You bounce as much as you want. That's okay. Okay, Agnes, you're last up.
Yeah, I was I just wanted to share as well my recent encounter, where I encountered somebody who was challenging and questioning the aspect of DNA cleansing. And I thought, wow, that is so strange. After all the sessions I've gone through, and I've seen fruit, of lie burst upon lie burst. So, and then God in his mercy, he knew how I was just so, I was like, no, that's not possible. And so he just got Pamela to share this teaching of you teaching on DNA cleansing. And I was like, yeah, thank you, Lord, thank you. So it brought about everything, And Laura in that session asked, how proportionate is your DNA cleansing to your, to your being able to hear God and to see God? And that was exactly the same question that I wanted to ask you. So yeah. Thank you so much.
There is obviously it seems like, things are in opposition quite a lot. And there are those who use the finished work of the cross and, well, it's all completed and it's all done in the cross. Therefore, you just have to embrace it and it's all done. And I believe that. I believe Jesus did everything necessary for me to live in full, restored relationship and everything else. But I see it as a process of believing or coming into the knowledge of that rather than a simply, well, Jesus did it all, therefore everything should be okay. Well, plainly it isn't. And even in the people who teach that everything's finished and done, it clearly isn't, because of, when I see them responding to some of the things online, they're not coming out of a very gracious, loving attitude, some of them. So it shows that actually they're not perfect or complete. Even though Jesus has done everything, it is a process of renewing the mind. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. If you have your mind renewed to believe and engage with what Jesus has done, then it will begin to be outworked in your life. If you don't believe it, then it won't. But just trying to say I believe it doesn't make it so. And what I've seen is people are being encouraged just believe. Yeah, and if it's not working for you, then you don't believe enough. It's no different than the faith movement. They're just saying you need to have faith in the finished work of Jesus. And yes, you do, but it's his faith and his outworking of that in our lives so that it isn't automatic. That's the key. Jesus has done it, but it isn't automatic in our lives. It is a process of us coming into what he's done and appropriating it and living in it and seeing it heal us and restore us. Because if it was like Jesus died on the cross for our sin, he died on the cross for our sickness, he died on the cross to deal with everything, well then, if it was simply a matter of people receiving that as soon as they actually entered into a relationship with God, then everyone would be physically completely healed, mentally completely healed, everything completely dealt with. Well, the reality is that isn't true. Because if everything had dealt with, that would also deal with death. And therefore Christians would not be dying. So we need to appropriate the truth of all those things so it becomes our experience, and then we will begin to live out of it, rather than it just being an automatic thing that happens, because it isn't. It is a process of being not conformed to what we were and being conformed to what we are. And you have this, you are a new creation. And I think if you read that in the Mirror Bible, you'll find that what it's saying is, now we can actually begin to think according to God's view of us rather than to our own view. And that's what the new is. It's not just we are now a new creation and everything has changed. It's like, yes, we are a new creation from God's perspective, but it's actually what he's always had us to be. And when we conform to that, we will be transformed, metamorphosed into it. Metamorphosis is not automatic. A butterfly has to go through the different phases of metamorphosis to become a butterfly. It starts out as a caterpillar, and before that it started out as some sort of egg or larvae or something. That's what happens. It's a process. So I don't disagree with the finished work of Jesus. I just don't believe it's an automatic thing that happens automatically, because the evidence that is there that isn't true. And even if for those who are preaching it, it still seem to be true for those who are following that. Otherwise, they would all be perfect by now, and they're not. So, anyway. All right, I'm going to leave it there. And I'll catch up with you in a couple of weeks'